And we'll call this meeting to order at 4:33. And the first item, as always, is to amend if necessary and then accept the agenda. Does anyone have any amendments to make? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda. Thanks, Barbara. And a second? Thanks, Glenn. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Next agenda item is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was March 30th. And have you all had a chance to look at the minutes? And are there any changes needed? And if not, I'll entertain again a motion to approve those minutes. Thanks, Barbara. And a second. Thanks, Glenn. All in favor, please raise your hand. If any are opposed, please raise your hand. And hearing none, that motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Let the record reflect that there are no members of the public here with us tonight. Do you want me to shut that?
Just a little bit.
Yeah. I felt so good that it's going to blow our stuff around. Okay. So the next item on the agenda, I just, put these into updates so that we would see where the focus of our discussion was going to be this evening. But does anyone have anything new on one-to-one interviews? And does anyone have anything new to say on tracking requests for funding, which is Barbara's spreadsheet that itemized all of the different letters and requests that we have?
I think there's been 2 submissions that I've seen that I didn't add in. So I think you might have added 1 in, but there's probably 1 more that needs to go in there. And I forget now who it was from.
The blueberry patch was not included in your chart, and we got that letter from.
Right, that's 1. I knew there were 2, and I just haven't had time to get to that at all.
But they're in the folder.
Right, I think so.
One thing I just wanted to mention is that John Grant happened to send pictures out of the storm drainage
Yeah, I
problem.
saw that.
Okay, so that's what I was just wondering if they were gotten. And yeah, they were apparently.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Okay, so I think that maybe we should all just go back and review that to make sure that everything that we remember is on there. Again, it's not, we were not accepting, we had not asked for applications. So it was, really, to me, the use of that was to get an idea of what applications we might get, but we are not to consider it to be an exhaustive list of the things that people might propose, once we have these allocation categories in mind and have made recommendations. And of course, all of this is entirely up to the decision of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance once we make our recommendations.
I just noticed something on the paper here. I have my figures under the column for my distribution, but I also put down comments for discussion, and they're not listed here. Were they gotten?
I'm sure they were, but there was no way for me to update everybody's comments when I updated this. It doesn't automatically flow onto that. So hopefully you have a list of your own
I do.
comments so that you can spur the discussion for that.
I brought my laptop on my laptop.
Excellent, because I know Patricia had comments as well, so she can spur the discussion for her comments as well.
Great. Well, let's move into that. But if you don't mind, I actually want to just move first to 5E, because I don't think that is a long time discussion, and I want to make sure that we don't forget it or run out of time. And I put presentation to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance on this agenda because initially we were thinking that we were going to make a presentation to the Board of Selectmen at their second April meeting, which is next Thursday. And I don't believe that we're going to be ready, although I think that we should still, do as much as we can to make sure that we are ready within the month of April. But I also think that it would be probably more satisfying to us after doing all of this work to ask the Board of Selectmen to schedule a special meeting where we could present our report. Because I'm afraid that if we just go on a regular meeting agenda, that the meeting will go on and on and on and on. And 3 hours into the meeting, it'll be time to talk about ARPA and no one will be in the mood anymore. And I think this is too significant for our town to, to just rush through on a regular meeting agenda.
Works for me.
Agreed.
I think that's a good idea.
But you have / Board of Finance. Are you suggesting a joint meeting for them?
I thought that well, I don't know. Let's talk about that.
Because there's a budget hearing the first week of May, and then 3 weeks later is the budget vote. So I'm not sure the Board of Finance, and they have one regular meeting in between there. So they're going to be a little tight for time.
Is that to a certain extent, like is the Board of Finance expecting to hear anything about our needs assessment and recommendations in tandem with the budget?
I don't think they are. I mean, my impression was that we would put this together, submit it to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen will review it, make their own choices of the recommendations, pass it on to the Board of Finance. That's what I thought was going to happen.
Well, okay, so once we get our recommendations prepared and submitted, and the regular town budget, the selectmen are preparing and Board of Finance is doing also. So if there isn't anything that we are recommending that is in the budget, does it, is it critical that they have to be at the meeting presentation?
Who, the Board of Finance?
Yes.
No, it's not critical that they need to be there.
When we present to the Board of
Whether there's-
Selectmen.
Yeah, when even if there was things there shouldn't be anything in the ARPA recommendations that are in the budget.
Right. It should be separate from the budget. But does that in any way affect our thinking about whether or not we should have our special meeting with the Board of Selectmen before or after the budget is passed?
I don't think it should make any difference. Because based on my theory that there wouldn't be anything in here, any recommendation that would subsequently be removed from the budget. It shouldn't be. I don't think. Any thoughts?
No, I agree.
Patricia, any thoughts?
Well, given the fact that there are at least one, maybe two entities that have applied for funding, I think it's Parks and Rec #1, from the budget on both the capital plan and a double request from ARPA. There are a couple of those that have been double or triple requests for funds, I guess hedging their bets that they'll get nixed out of the budget and fall into ARPA. It might be better to have it after the budget, but for the most part, I don't think it will be a big interference, so it can happen anytime. My guess is Board of Selectmen is not going to want to do the special meeting before the budget is finished anyway, though.
Well, like the hearing, or the,
Once it goes to the hearing, the Board of Selectmen are pretty much out of it. It's the Board of Finance that takes over from there at that point.
I had a question, and I don't want to take up too much time with this, but anyway, the budget itself, I just happened to look at it. It was in the folder, the Google folder, and I saw it. today. The Park and Rec line item, it has something on there where it says maintenance
Mhm,
for the Park and Rec.
mhm,
I think it said 45,000.
mhm.
They already are getting funding for maintaining their facilities.
They're asking for funding to maintain the KCS ball fields, which are down there.
Okay,
The money that, I believe the money they're asking for through ARPA is for different things. They're asking for drainage and Emery Park and
oh,
Kent Commons Park, I believe.
yeah, no, I was just wondering about
Mhm,
that because I
yeah,
thought to myself,
it's
it says
different.
maintenance. Well, what type of maintenance was that? That's
For
for
the
the ball
ball
fields.
fields.
I-
Where
Okay,
they play baseball.
okay.
So just getting back to the presentation, why don't I send a note to the Board of Selectmen, saying that we would like to have a special meeting rather than just be on the agenda for a regular meeting, that we anticipate having our report done by the end of April and seeing what the consensus is as to when that might be, when would be a good time for that meeting. And I think that once the Board of Finance has the budget to the point where it's doing the hearing, it's not gonna really matter. I mean, the Board of Selectmen should be free to have a special meeting to look at this than it has been, in quite some time while working on the budget. Yeah. We good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then let's get back to the, the real discussion for tonight. I'm not just making a note to myself, which is to try and go a little farther on our categories, our recommendations for allocations, and how we're going to present, like what we are going to say with respect to, within the categories, why we feel these are the right categories, and what types of work we expect to get from people in those categories. And if there are things that we feel are gravely needed for the town, either in response to the COVID pandemic or to make up for damage from the COVID pandemic, or that go to resilience of our town for future COVID related impacts and other like impacts, as well as what we're hearing from residents about what they think the town needs. And I'm sort of thinking of those things as a little bit different, because in my mind, the ARPA funds really are meant to be one-time injections that are related to COVID, that are, responsive to COVID. And I think that we uncovered, as did the POCD survey, a lot of opinions about what our town needs to be a better community. And I think that those opinions are legitimate, and, should be conveyed to the Board of Selectmen, but I see them as just a little bit different. Those two things just as a little bit different.
Okay.
I don't think of them as different, Connie. I think that the COVID pandemic funds, I don't believe that the intention of the federal government in dispersing them to states and towns across the country was to give individuals the majority of the money, and breaks they have other programs for that. I think it's to find a balance between helping people who really need help and being able to do some things for the community that make the community better for future such events or in general. And I think most people see it that way. If you look at the things that Joe uncovered, what other towns are doing, I think that is largely how people are addressing it. Where are the shortfalls in our community? What was particularly lacking during COVID, but in general, and how could we use ARPA funds to make Kent a more equitable and nicer community when dealing with these issues and in general. So that's the approach I took in my mind.
The approach that I used when I came up with my figures is that I used numbers. I used numbers that that I could get my hands on for each of the 6 different categories. I looked at them and I thought to myself, okay, do I feel comfortable with these amounts? And there's a few that I would like to tweak a little bit, but overall, I think the amounts that I had put down there, I feel okay with. For me to go through them one by one, I have them in my notes, or not my notes, but the comments that I put on the Google Sheets. But
They're in the minutes from last week also.
those are just the numbers, Patricia, but I put
Yep.
comments down on the Google Sheets as to how I arrived at my distribution. That's what isn't on the Google Sheets. But anyhow, I don't know if there's time to go through it today that I put down, but if there is, I could go through that. I don't know how the others feel.
Well, is there any, I mean, I know maybe this is just not the way at all, but Barbara has put an average column on this spreadsheet to kind of, to get us to like some middle ground.
Mhm.
And, to the extent that different beliefs and really feel that, their beliefs are warranted,
Absolutely.
maybe we ought to look towards
Well,
the average.
why don't I go through my comments and then?
Well, first, Joe, can I just say the averaging idea doesn't really work for me. I think it's lazy, frankly, because Connie's 400,000 for people number throws it out of whack. Craig's, I don't know, throws it out of whack. I think that is the easy way out, and we should be able to negotiate based on needs. You can't look at the categories as an entity in and of themselves. That's why I went through the exercise of thinking about what do I think we should do for at least 4 of the 6 categories, because until you do that, you can't really come up with a reasonable category number. Then it's just like picking numbers out of a hat.
So let me just, just to redirect you to the spreadsheet, I did ratchet my number down to 300,000. But I felt that given other outliers, that I was going to remain an outlier, because I still stand by my reason for coming up with that $400,000 number to begin with. And I don't want to come down and have that bring down the average. So to me, I'm more comfortable with an average than renegotiating my number and having the average look even lower, when I still believe actually that what I put as my number, I believe in it. I know that not everyone shares that opinion, but I do. That's my opinion.
Well, what Patricia was saying before is if looking at the 6 categories, I think that there is agreement, you know, on some categories for the nonprofits, for as for the amounts for the nonprofits and for the local businesses. There's not that much variation. For the, for example, for the restoring individuals and restoring residents and individuals, there's a lot of variation there. I raised the amount that I wanted to distribute to that to 40,000, and here's why. There was assistance that was provided already for through the Treasury for the 2 economic stimulus checks. There was supplemental unemployment. There was PPP grants and loans that were available. I used the Kent annual report as to the amount of families that had got assistance for from the food bank, or well, generally from the food bank, and the number was like 36. So people that had needed assistance, I would imagine, would have applied through the social director to avail themselves for the food bank. So the numbers were actually low, in my opinion, what I had seen. And I used the premium pay for the IGA workers to come up with 26,000. And I also had been listening in on the Sharon Arpa committee. For some reason, I've been getting their Zoom meetings and my Google Drive. And anyway, they had, I believe, 2 individuals in town that required assistance through their social service agency. So their demographics are similar to Kent's. So going on that information, that's how I came up with my figure for that category. For the fire department, I went with the list that they had submitted. You know, if the list should be sent back asking if they really need all that equipment on there, and if they could prioritize the equipment on that list to get a lower amount, that might be an idea to get more agreement with that category. For the municipal, for town hall, municipal facilities, how I came up with my figure for that is I used the requests that were in the Google folder, used those, and came up with the requests that were in there being the hybrid meetings and the request for laptops. And that was all that was in there. So adding the education, the request from the Board of Education for their enrichment program, I came up with a figure of 40,000, just using those alone, because there hasn't been any more requests that were gotten. So I don't know what they need or what would be requested. So I used those figures to come up with that amount that I chose. So that's how I basically arrived at the figures that I had gotten for my distribution.
I think it's really important to remember, Joe, that we have not received all of the applications that we would expect, because I think the community would not be pleased with us if we limited what we thought should be awarded to people that have spoken up and sent us a letter when there hasn't been an application process. I just don't think that we cannot base it on that. We have to base it on what we are hearing from people as an indication of need. with the idea that there might be a lot more out there.
So what
I
kind
think
of?
that, I think the application process is great for the Kent residents if we create parameters. I don't know, I sent it rather late, but parameters that I suggest are for people with incomes less than $100,000 for whom Kent is their primary resident. They can apply for funds. Kent businesses can be applications also. But I think for nonprofits, municipal infrastructure, and KVDT, it should not be an application process. We should be able to discuss and negotiate specific recommendations in those categories. To do less, I think, is not what the Board of Selectmen expected of us, not what the townspeople expected of us, certainly not what I expect of us. And I think we would be remiss if we just do categories and applications. It just would, I wouldn't be able to
Okay.
stand by that kind of report.
However, let's say there are 50 or more nonprofits in our town. Are we going to give an allocation to each nonprofit?
No, we're not. We're gonna choose
Even
some.
though those nonprofits might present an application that would fit and be very much for our liking, or have a need that we haven't heard about. We cannot use what we've heard from the community as exhaustive.
Honey, we have we have focus groups. You've read, we had several social services people, several nonprofit. We've had the scan, we've had individual talks. We have enough information to work from. We cannot, we can make decisions. That's what we were called to do.
No, we were called to do a needs assessment.
Call decisions about what's recommended, not what's done. You know what I mean?
What I was thinking is that all the nonprofits that have requested funding have applications sent to them. So therefore, there are people that are interested in applying. So if they are mailed applications, and then afterwards, having a period, like say a month or whatever, where other nonprofits can apply. And then once the money is gone, then it's closed. I mean, I would say like a month, month's time. But the ones that had requested, I myself would mail them applications. I mean, doesn't that sound like plausible?
Barbara, you were waiting to talk.
I got to figure out how far back I need to go. Let's see. To talk about originally just our whole philosophy here, I'll just put my philosophy out there. It's my philosophy that this money was given to local governments to help support the communities as a result of economic harm resulting from COVID. So I agree and disagree with a lot of different things that have been said so far. I think that the averaging factor is going to be successful for us, but I also think that for the first three categories, we do need to have an application process. We've been very specific, telling everybody we don't have applications. We haven't been accepting applications. So if we go and make direct allocations through to nonprofits, there may be other nonprofits that say, well, we were waiting for the application process, and now they've been locked out of the process. As far as the municipal, the fire department, and infrastructure, I think we can make direct allocations. I think those things are very known. I don't think they're going to be crawling out of the woodwork later on. And I do have a unique bird's eye view of the finances of the town and what money is coming from where and what money is available to go where. So I feel very comfortable making direct allocations in those three categories, but I would be uncomfortable not having an application process for the first three. And getting back to my direct allocations, Again, I feel that this money belongs in the community. The majority of it belongs in the community. So I have allocated it as such, 20% to residents, 20% to businesses, and I think, or no, 25, and 20 to nonprofits. And my theory is if we don't get enough applications in the window and there's money left over, that can roll over to a different category. But I think we have to allow the general public to come forward if they're going to. And I personally don't agree that everybody who may have been economically harmed has been revealed. And I don't think our survey results are an adequate measure of economic harm in our community by any means. So that's how I came to it.
So now for the, okay, I could see with the nonprofits and the businesses having an application being recommended, not recommended, if it follows the protocol for COVID. Now, for the individuals and residents, how would that, I mean, can you describe some of that? Because here's why. The Sharon Arpa committee had their social service director, I believe, is taking the applications from the two individuals that they have. So once they take the applications and it goes to the social service director, then money is paid out for them to pay the bills that they had needed. It doesn't go to the individual.
That's a whole different process. That's what we do now with social services. This isn't meant to augment our social service department. This is meant to relieve economic harm to individuals. And actually, I think, Patricia, I did read your email and I read your recommendations. And Patricia had some very good recommendations on how to structure the applications to sort of qualify people in different categories. I'm not sure, or maybe I should back up and say, maybe that needs a little bit of tweaking, because $100,000 could mean very different things to a person, a family of 2 people versus a family of 6 people. So I think that would need to be looked at, but I think there's a way to do it. And I do think that the general public, businesses, nonprofits, everybody is waiting for the application. They are waiting.
They are waiting.
I also think they're waiting for disbursement, really. So if we do applications for residents, we do applications for businesses. There are some nonprofits that have taken the time to participate in this thing and have made their needs really clear, black and white, dollars and cents. So perhaps we can give those, if we discuss specific letters of application, not official applications, we can create a budget for nonprofits, some of which is earmarked specifically. We know Kent Memorial Library needs $5,000 for that. That's an easy yes for me. We know the Kent HVA wants a certain amount of funds to do more weekend patrolling of the river and the parks. That's an obvious need we see every summer. We can recommend that, I think. And there are others in that category, and make the category larger than the disbursements, and people can apply. And then municipal and infrastructure make specific recommendations. Is that a compromise position?
That sounds like it is to me. Like you're saying, you're going to do sort of a hybrid for the nonprofits.
Yeah, because, we've heard so much from some of them, and they're no brainers. We know we should do them. We know the Kent Memorial Library was a lifesaver. They found a way to to raise the funds they need for other projects. They're asking for a mere $5,000 to subscribe to Canopy, get outdoor heaters and a new camera and tripod to be able to screen events. That to me seems obvious, yes. So, and I would like this report to have some good news in it for people, and not just, yeah, nothing specific yet, guys. So I think the hybrid approach to nonprofits is great. Applications for residents, applications for businesses, hybrid nonprofits, municipal and infrastructure, and KV, Kent Volunteer Fire Department, specific recommendations. I could endorse that approach.
So I just think that for the nonprofits that we might want to say, these are nonprofits that we heard from and think have applications or needs that are worthy of funding. I worry about publishing the amounts that certain nonprofits have asked for. I wonder about whether some of these nonprofits would have asked for different things if they knew if there was an application process with guidelines. If we had it, if we had a framework rather than just having an unsolicited letter, we might be able to say to nonprofits, let us know how you were damaged and what those extra expenses were, and let us know if you have programs that you want to run for our community. And I think that their requests might have been different, some of them, maybe not all of them. So
those are all assumptions, and the nonprofits were very specific in the focus group about what they endured, how they worked around the problems, and what they needed going forward. I don't understand the resistance to saying yes to some of them. Yes, we recommend that Board of Selectmen give you this. It's thoroughly, utterly transparent, number one. And when people wrote their letters of request, they knew that this was a public process. I think it's really a good compromise.
My preference would be that we have a process that allots up to a certain amount available to any nonprofit that wants to apply. And that is how I think we should do it. Because what if the library could think of another great program that it wanted to run and it wanted $10,000? What if, I just think it is patently unfair to allot money without having an application process. I think we've heard about needs. We know a lot about needs that will help us set the limit, to help us craft an application, help us describe to the Board of Selectmen what kinds of needs people have, what types of organizations might be funded or that they can expect we would get an application for. But I don't think that I'm resistant. I think I am open-minded, and I think that I'm thinking this process through beyond the limited information that we have. We have a lot of information, but it is still limited. It is still not the extent of the information that we might get if we actually created some kind of guidance that said to folks, this is what's available to you potentially if you have these needs and if you want to deliver these programs to our community members.
Well, I've looked at the recommendations from the nonprofits. Essentially, all of them that are in there, I basically agree with. There may be one or two that I don't really, I wouldn't recommend, but basically all of them I would, and since the funds are finitely limited, how can we keep everything open, waiting for another group to appear, to apply?
We would, like you said, Joe, like you suggested, we would give a short application process, like a month. We would set aside a certain amount of funding, like what we've done on these sheets with this allocation, and we would invite nonprofits
But
make,
that would make it impossible for us to make specific recommendations
no, it
in
wouldn't.
municipal
it wouldn't.
infrastructure.
You are not hearing me out and you interrupted me. Please.
This
What
is a
if-
conversation of 6 members.
I
It's
know,
not a tutorial.
I was not tutorialing. What I was saying that would work is to have a short application period within which to allocate all of the money that we've put into a pot. We can absolutely recommend to the Board of Selectmen saying, we've heard from nonprofits presenting very, probative, credible applications that they have needs in the area of this amount. And we would like to be able to offer up to this amount for profits. And we expect to make a certain number of grants to nonprofits, but I don't think that we can consider this the exhaustive list. And I think it's somewhat risky for us to publish the amounts that we expect the Board of Selectmen to allocate to all of these nonprofits without having a guidance and application process. And I don't disagree with any of you about whether or not these grants are valid, valuable, and should be funded. The expectation is that all of them would be. Just that.
No, well, we have a clear disagreement on that point. I think a hybrid approach is the better approach. I think we can make some specific recommendations. I think that they wouldn't have made the requests if they didn't expect it to be in some way publicized in our report. So I don't have that same fear. And I think that it should be a vote when we have our full members.
So if we had chose a period of time, to keep the application process open, say like to the end of May, and then afterwards, it's closed, nonprofits cannot apply after that time. How does that sound?
Say that again, Joe?
No, I was thinking that, okay, since we have information now with requests, and we're basically all in agreement as to an amount that we, have selected to distribute. So if we're in agreement on all that, just having mail out applications to whoever has requested already, have them, send them an application, have them fill it out, and then it's stored, and then afterwards keep the application time open for, say, a month or so. We'll say like the end of May, and then it's closed. What do you think of that?
I'm not sure that's different from how that's different from Connie's suggestion. Isn't that what Connie said? To do a short application process?
Yes, right. The end of May, I mean, that's a short time, right?
I mean, we could even try to shortcut the process and save all of these organizations the time of doing a new application. We
I was
could
thinking the
just
same thing. They
take
could-
them all in as an application
Right, we
unless
could
they
give them
wanted
the
to change
option
it.
to say that what they've already submitted is their request. That'd be easy enough to do.
I was just thinking, for the sake of transparency, this way here, everyone is treated the same.
That's a concern too, yeah. Definitely is a
This
concern.
way here, no one can, complain about something, something that they didn't get that someone else got.
Well, do we have agreement on what we think that pot might be? I mean, that it's it's close. And that's why I think that's why when I looked at the averages, I felt a little better about it than, than it was. I guess initially I felt like maybe averaging was a cop out, but when I really looked at it, it seems like it did a pretty good job of just kicking the outliers out and, coming in around where there actually was agreement. And so, at least with the nonprofits, if we think we're close, we could set that pot at 190, like the average is 188. Patricia put 190, we could set that pot at 190 today, and just that would be
196.
I have 190 on your notes. 190.
Yeah, I have 196.
But this is what you emailed out to us. Where's the
Yeah,
other 6?
That's what I have. Oh, no. Yeah, I'm looking at an earlier one. Sorry, you're right, 190.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't argue with you because I was above, I think, on that, but maybe we ought to just set that pot at 190 and then we can feel, pretty accomplished for.
Do we want to wait until Craig has a chance to put his input in?
Probably. I mean,
But he's here, we can't. If we keep waiting for everybody to have
Yeah.
consensus, we're never gonna get it done. I agree with picking set dollar amounts. We can discuss them again later if we have to, but I think that would be a good outcome for today. And I also think another good outcome for today would be to set a cap on individual grants. I mean, and I don't mean 2 individuals, I mean each grant category. So,
right.
and I'm just gonna throw it out there, $10,000 to nonprofits and $10,000 to businesses and $5,000 to individuals.
Yeah, but you have some like the affordable housing. And
But
they're gonna request more.
Doesn't
than what-
matter, then they would only get 10,000
They
if
get
that's our
10.
cap. Because that way, that ensures that there's enough so that everybody gets some. So, and I'll use the blueberry bushes as an example. They came in, they wanted what, $25,000? Sorry, you only can have 10. Well, maybe they can go find the 15 or do a fundraiser and find it elsewhere. I don't know, but I don't think it's a good idea to 100% fund everybody that comes across. I think the best way to make it fair is to set a parameter, say this is the cap. If you're below the cap, great, then you'll get maybe 100% of what you're asking for. But if you're above the cap, we need to be able to spread it.
Will they be able
I
to
think-
apply more than once?
Only if there was residual funding.
No, but that again seems too easy to me. Kent Affordable Housing could do next to nothing with $20,000. It's not a down payment on a property that they might want to purchase to turn into. So I think there has to be some thought put into it. I don't know, it seems
Distinguish Kent Affordable Housing, depending on what they're asking for. So if a nonprofit is asking for, lost wages or lost income or increased expenses, I think a $10,000 cap is fine. I think if they're asking to run a program, a $10,000 cap is fine. The difference with Kent Affordable Housing is that they're more like the municipal and the infrastructure requests. Their requests might be like fix a building, which is so different than, run a program.
And I think they also have federal grants that they can apply for that other nonprofits may not have access to.
I personally like the caps because I think it spreads it as evenly, certainly, but as far as possible. And we know that, infrastructure and municipal wise, we're not going to be able to fund all of the different requests that we've got already. And we know that. So, I think it's,
Those kind of requests could use up to $800,000 on one project.
Yeah, I don't think it's a unfair to place a limitation on nonprofits, but if it needs to go up, it could be 15. I thought 10 was a good starter. In fact, I'm behind those recommendations.
Which 3 categories are we talking about, Kathy? The first
The
3
first 3
First
were
3.
people would be applications, and then
applications.
the other 3, we would make specific recommendations because those are really easy to qualify. And I mean, there's only one fire department. It's not like there's gonna be another one coming forward. And there's only one municipal entity.
Yeah, I have a question though, and maybe this is for a later discussion, maybe we should finish this CAP discussion. But it seems like we have talked about things that are needs that we haven't heard an application for. And we also are like, the fire department has told us what they want. But if we said, well, we can't give you everything, but we can only give you this, would we choose what
I
we
think
want
we
to
would.
fund?
Because when
Okay.
I looked closely at their request, I could mentally connect COVID to some of the things that they're asking for and not to other things. So they're asking for communication upgrades. That's imperative when you've got a pandemic and people are sequestering in their homes, and that communication is imperative. The other thing that they asked for, which on first blush I thought was sort of frivolous, but now I don't, is the upgraded equipment for their exercise room to build community amongst them, to keep them healthy during a period of time when it's difficult to get out and get exercise and that kind of thing. So I think those 2 things of their request are full of merit. I make that connection. So yes, I think we would definitely tell them how the money can only be spent, because otherwise we don't want to see a brand new shiny fire truck driving down the road without being paid for with ARPA money.
So not just the allocation, but the specific
Absolutely.
request.
And just like
For those
Patricia has
categories.
on her thing, and the only one I can remember off the top of my head is the library. But if we're gonna make direct allocations, then they need to be that specific that they have to prove to us that they spent the money on those things. Because I have reporting back to the federal government, and I can't just say, well, we gave them $5,000 for a canopy, but they actually went and bought books with it instead. You know, I don't want.
The canopy is not a canopy. I think it's a media program that they get services from.
Terminology, but I think it was just to make a point, really, all I was doing.
That actually brings up something that I was wondering about, is the reporting
Yeah.
to the US Treasury.
Yeah.
There's a form, right, that has to be due for April 30th. Project
That has nothing to do with our
expenditures.
committee, though. That's me. That's part of my municipal side of the
But
job.
I mean, some of the infrastructure projects, don't they have to be listed on that?
They would if those were what the money was being spent on, but we're not there yet.
But I mean, if this report is due April 30th, if it's not listed on there, how,
It doesn't-
is it lost out?
No. The reporting requirements are such that on a regular basis, everybody who's getting ARPA money, and when I say everybody, I mean the municipalities and the cities, have to report how they're handling that. That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be reporting how we're handling it. Once things get allocated further down the road and we make our recommendations and money starts flowing out the door, I'll be reporting on that. That has nothing to do with our.
Yeah,
Right.
well,
So-
the reason why I'm asking that is because, being the ARPA committee and everything, if this information is shared with the committee, right?
It's going to be shared with the entire United States.
Yeah, so basically the report is that we haven't made allocations yet,
Correct.
kind of more or less.
Right.
And as long as we make our allocations of the first tranche by next January or something like
They have to
that.
be allocated by December of '24.
Okay, so I mean, there's,
All of it does.
you know, we don't anticipate ever getting to that point. But if Barbara was just putting a report in according to the schedule that, you know, no allocations have been made, no allocations have been made, no allocations have been made, all the way up until that due date, that would be fine.
Yeah, they just want to know what we're doing.
Yeah, because like I just happened to see the project and expenditure report is due April 30th.
Yeah,
so
and
then
it's
I was
going to be
thinking,
full of zeros at this point because we haven't expended any money.
oh,
The easiest
okay,
report
that's
ever.
what that means. Then. If nothing's spent, no
Right.
form is.
No, I still have to submit a form, but it's going to be that portion of the report will be full of zeros.
Yeah. Let's see. Nothing to share then.
Pretty much.
Just a general question, are we happy with these numbers? I've heard in this meeting, averages was the easy way out. Maybe we shouldn't have done averages.
Well, we didn't
Maybe-
hear what you said. What was your opinion on this?
I'm looking at these numbers and there are two classifications here, residents and infrastructure, that are the biggest difference. I mean, residents, the low is 25,000, the high was 300. And it was higher. Infrastructure, we have 0 to 290,000. So it seems to me the other four categories, we had some kind of agreement. It was on 100, it was under 200,000, the difference. But there's two categories that are pretty radically different. And based on the last meeting we had, we do have a bit of a difference of philosophy. That's how we started this conversation. I know we're missing a committee member here, but I mean, where do we move forward from
We
here?
have to keep going,
we
whether
have to
our
keep
committee
going.
member is here or not.
Okay, so we need to come up with, I mean, so if we're in agreement on this, we have to move forward to some degree. We can
I would
still
agree.
talk about applications, but if we want to get a
Well, I think-
report to the Board of Selectmen, we have to move fairly
I
quickly.
think what we're talking about now is coming up with exact dollar amounts for these categories. So we've got the 190 already
Okay,
for
so
the
so we're okay doing that.
nonprofits.
Okay.
And then I agree with Connie that the averaging process actually kicked out the outliers and gave us a better average, or gave us a real average. So if you look at these averages, I think it's going to be relatively easy to allocate this money, looking at the averages.
Yeah, with the exception of unallocated amounts, which I didn't put
That's
anything.
$12,000.
Yeah, it's nothing.
That's
Between, you got 11% to 17, it's pretty close range.
That's nothing,
Okay.
the 12 grand. I mean, that could just be a reserve to pay for the
Yeah.
postcards and whatever else we've already spent. That's come out of my
Okay.
budget line.
Well, and we also probably should round up to, you know, we
I
should make
agree.
these numbers
Yes.
round numbers.
I agree.
So we'll see how much. is
I think we should look at municipal and infrastructure before we settle on the category things, because I agree with Craig that one thing that the ARPA funds should do is to make a perceivable difference in the quality of life here in Kent. We can make some really positive contributions to the town that everyone can enjoy and feel, whether they personally lost money or not. And I think that it's important to talk about those specifically before we agree to category amounts.
Okay, but I'm confused as to how everybody in Kent would recognize a benefit from something that we do here at the town hall, unless it's the Zoom room.
Well, and
Well, that's sort of it. That's
Yeah,
I'm not
I'm
certain
confused.
that fix of drainage would actually be a permanent fix. The drainage
Right.
over there is an issue that is gonna take a little bit more focus to really resolve. There are issues in drainage in South Commons and in the field, and you know, and it's all connected. So to put a Band-Aid on something that really should be provided for in the town's budget and taking care of its own property, to me is a little unsatisfactory. It reminds me of when
What are you talking about?
the drainage for Park and Rec issue. I think, not that I don't think it should be fixed,
Right.
which is so different. But I don't see that as having the same kind of a quality of life give back to the town as, providing for the Park and Rec programming that we heard about in our survey, for example. But that I don't think is a money issue. I think that was partially an issue that we were in transition and we were having a pandemic, and things seem to be, on a very upward trend right now with Park and Rec.
Well, here's how I approach that for the storm drainage issue for the Park and Rec. This has been the survey does provide the residents have said that they're in favor of programs and activities, so forth, to use for the recreational facilities here in town. I mean, it got a positive support. Now, this storm drainage problem has been an ongoing problem with the Park and Rec department. I have heard about it. I've heard about it quite a while from the beginning of this committee since it was formed. Both parks, Emery Park and Kent Common, both have a problem with drainage issues, storm drainage. The ARPA funding specifically provides funds for treatment for this problem. They would need, for Emery Park and for Kent Commons, if there were an engineering study done, that would be like $60,000 each, I would think. They haven't provided any written numbers, as to what this would cost, but I'm just estimating. I'm saying 60,000 times 2, 120,000, and then plus the request from the sewer commission. The ARPA funding does provide funding for that. I think it was 57,000. And then totaling those two things together, that comes out to 177,000. And then, for what I've requested, that leaves 65,000 left over. So it's an expensive amount, but this is an ongoing problem. Apparently it's not going to go away.
It's not going to be fixed with 120,000.
No, it's not.
And
But
have
they
you
will be
been
able-
to Kent Commons Park?
I've been to both of them. Kent Commons has a culvert issue or whatever, the culvert floods and so forth. There's pictures that were taken with that. It's, it would have to be an ongoing problem, I would think.
I
that, the
just
selectmen
think
have to
that
deal
the
with.
town has some thinking to do with respect to what it wants its public parks to be before it really knows. I mean, nobody even knows where Kent Commons is. There's not even a sign. And I think that there are a lot of good ideas, and
Well, whose
I was
fault is
part
that?
of a subcommittee that put together an RFP to do a study, and it never happened. And I don't know, so that's my personal feeling on the drainage is that it's really important for the town to focus on this, but ARPA is not going to touch that. We're not going to really be able to have a positive impact on that issue with our funding.
Well, they provide the funding specifically, for
It just would be a drop in the bucket, I think is what I'm saying.
it's there and it's, it wouldn't.
Well, I think they put a number in of $75,000 to resolve the storm and drainage thing. I read that somewhere.
Threw in there because they didn't have any idea how much to put in there. And I've actually heard different numbers coming out of Park and Rec. One was 225,000 and the other one was like 35,000. So they don't have any consensus even amongst their own board as to how to approach this issue. Just extra info, but I have a Board of
I know,
Finance
I
meeting
think that
at
we need
6,
to.
and I
wrap.
need to get ready for that, and I apologize, but the Board of Finance is like all over me.
I think that we do need to wrap. I think that we made some progress. That we can continue to make progress next week. We're not presenting on Thursday, so that's a good thing. Craig is going to send comments that we can all read but not discuss until next Wednesday. And he thought that he would get those comments to us tomorrow. So
I think before we end the meeting, I'd like to just go through this average and just round these numbers up so that we get a total for each category. Take 5 minutes. Okay? Okay. So for the residents, the average right now is 145. Between all of us, I say we set that at 160. For the businesses, the average is 137. I say we set that at 150. And then we've got the 190 already in the nonprofits.
Barbara, could you just recap them quickly again?
160 for residents, 160,000 for the first category. 150,000 for the second category. 190,000 for the third category.
150 or 60 for businesses.
50, because that's
Okay.
going to give us an even 400,000.
Yeah.
Right? So we put 150 in infrastructure. 150 in municipal. What does that leave us with?
What was the fire department amount?
That's the last one. That's the one I'm,
111-ish, right?
yeah, that's the one I'm giving the balance to. At 4, 5, 6, 7, nope, 121, right? 121,855.
And I like that, you know.
121 where?
That's the balance, 121,855.
Or Ken Volunteer Fire Department?
Yep. And that adds up to that, right? 821,855. Quick math?
So now if you take the average, taking the average of all these 6 categories, is any one of them come up with over 50%?
No.
No.
Okay,
And Barbara had shared her opinion that, you know, that she would feel good about half the money, you know, being allocated first to residents, businesses, and nonprofits to the extent that it's needed. And if there's any left over, then it can be applied to, you know, some of these other categories. And we can feel free to make that recommendation too, if we find that, you know, using these numbers is going to mean that certain things that we've heard about come up short. You know, we could say, you know, it would be our feeling that if there's any left over from that 400,000,
No, hold on.
doesn't it?
So 160, 150, 190,
That's 400.
400, and
And
that's
then
121.
And then these two are each 150, so that's 300, so that's 7. 821,855.
821, gotcha.
So if everybody's okay with those allocations, I suggest we vote on those.
well, and now we don't have.
think municipal-
I think we are over.
Wait, yeah,
I think
hold on.
we're over because 160, 150, and 190 is not 400, it's 500.
Could we just, you know, put this on hold till the next meeting, because Craig will have a chance to, you know, to
Well, I think that
contribute.
it would be good to present to Craig the movement that we had during this meeting. I mean, he did miss the meeting. You know, it wasn't his fault.
So
He
then-
had a commitment.
So all we have to do now is make the infrastructure municipal each 100,000.
What's left?
That's-
To 100
I think that's, you're making municipal and infrastructure 100 now?
each. Yep,
Yep.
That's too low.
right.
It's
think.
still above the average for municipal. It's not, and it's, oh, no, it's not. It's just, we might want to spread that out more evenly among the 3 categories.
Now, one other thing too is that Ruth, she changed her allocation, her
Yeah, that's
her
included here.
distributions. So,
That's included here.
there, it was divided between municipal and infrastructure. That was what she agreed to?
Yes, she changed it herself.
Well, I think doing it this way, municipal and maybe even infrastructure are too low, but certainly municipal is. And probably Kent Volunteer Fire Department is a bit high.
So
You know what I think we should do, actually, because we need to close? I think we should close on this discussion saying, now that we have this uneasy feeling that maybe those numbers aren't right for categories 4, 5, and 6, we should go back and look at the things that we had heard about in each of those categories so that we can feel like, okay, maybe, you know, that pot should be less in the fire department, a little bit more in municipal, or a little bit more in infrastructure. Because I don't feel like I have a full grasp on exactly what is in all of those categories. And I think I would be better able to speak on it.
Yeah, I mean, I did that because that was what we set for homework for this week. 2 weeks ago, we said everyone should come with specific recommendations in categories, which is why I went through the thought and process of doing that in the first place, because we said that was our homework. So,
So you have no homework for next week.
I actually did make the allocations, but they're just in the notes in my
Yeah,
columns.
so let's just look back at it and figure it out. I think it's good progress. We have 321, almost 322,000 to think about, you know, for next time. And I really do think we're making progress on this, so this is good. Yeah. So I think that was our next steps. We didn't discuss the report outline, that's okay. Let's adjourn and we will have our meeting next week on the 20th at 4:30. Sound good? Okay. 5:45, folks. Thank you.